The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's presentation on the key benefits of business intelligence. We have some very, very exciting information to share with you guys today, whether you're new to using Power BI or if you're an expert in Power BI, there's still going to be some awesome information here for you. We do have Tanya Henderson, who is wonderful enough to join us today, and she's going to be sharing all of that key information with you. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Tanya. Tanya.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And welcome everybody to our Power BI session. So what we're going to talk about, we're going to just get into a lot of the different features of Power BI. We will have some questions that will be kind of our polls that will be coming up as we're going through this session. Just kind of getting a little bit of information about who we have with us and, how many people have used Power BI, how long they've used it, some of those type of polls. So if everybody will answer those, it'll help us to gauge kind of where I can slow down or go faster in some of those areas. And so of course, my slide deck is not being nice. There we go. So I am Tanya Henderson. I have been working, I was a GP consultant for now 22 years. I have been working on Business Central for about the last 5 years. So I definitely have a mix of both of those products, and I use both with Power BI. I do work on a lot of conference committees. We just got back from Directions in Florida. So we did a lot of different stuff on the Power BI, Power Automate products, which was pretty cool. I do some YouTubes on certain things, not a lot of Power BI YouTubes, but do a lot of Business Central and some GP also videos out there. And I'm happy to help. If anybody ever needs anything, you can always ask me, send me questions. I'm happy to answer all of those questions. So as we get into this, what I'm going to go over today is I'm going to go over the connections with Power BI. So we will show you how to connect the data to Power BI, how to do some transforming that data rather than just putting all of the data in the tables, because you definitely don't want to do that. Because if you do that, it's going to take forever for your data to load, whether you're in GP or BC, Salesforce, or any of those other products. So we teach you how to kind of transform that. Then we'll go over just very briefly over modeling. Also understand we are taking about, I'll say 45 to 50 minutes today to do an overview of Power BI. So what you want to understand is there is a lot more to Power BI. So we are just, getting the very top layer of what is in Power BI. If you have used Excel with Power Query, that's another product that is very similar to Power BI once you get into the data modeling and the transforming the data. So if you have that kind of history, it'll definitely help you out a lot. And then we'll get into some of the design, how you can design those visuals with inside of Power BI, and how you can do some other advanced features. So I'm going to connect it through Excel too, and so show you some just a few kind of things through Excel, which are also pretty cool. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about first the connections. And with the connections, I think we do have our first poll that's going to be coming up. So on that poll, we will I will let that poll come up so that we can kind of talk about that first. And then I should be able to get a result. And I think it comes through the chat. I'm not sure.
All right, Tanya, I'm not sure if you're able to see. I did share on screen. You should be seeing the results, which we have 50% at less than a year and 50% at 2 to 5 years that they've been using Power BI.
Okay, so we are right in the middle. All right, awesome. So I will kind of, I'll go right in the middle and kind of just stay with showing you those connections. And I am going to kind of go through my slide deck a little bit, and then I will also offer up my slide deck if anybody wants to take a look at that. But so as we're going through, I will do a demo at the end, and I will show you kind of how some of those connections will work. So how do we connect data with Power BI? So when you launch Power BI, you can use what's called Power BI Online, which will allow you to edit reports. Almost nobody does that, just because that particular editor is not as robust as what is called the desktop editor. So if you go to the PowerBI.com website, and you sign up, which you can do a free trial, and they usually will extend it out a little bit as well, so you can sometimes get 60 days free. There are multiple licenses that are available for Power BI, one being a free license, one being a pro license, and there's a premium per user, and then there's a premium per user capacity, which is like $5,000 a month. So the premium per user license is, like you may do a pro license and you could do a trial for a premium. Mainly that premium per user gives you a little bit more capacity and a little more data. And then for the most things that I use it for was for paginated reports. So you can actually create premium workspaces and then use that paginated report in that workspace, and everybody could consume that. I will say that when I'm in an organization and I am using, the Power BI Online, I almost tell everybody, just go ahead and get a pro license, because you actually can't consume the data with a free license. You can connect with Power BI, you just would not be able to publish it with that free license. So that's why I say just go with the pro. I think it's $10 a month. You don't have to actually publish it to PowerBI.com. You can still use desktop. And if you're not, again, publishing that, you can use it all you want. It's a free product and you're just connecting to the data. So as you can see here, I just have a very quick slide about connecting to the data. You can download the desktop version on PowerBI.com. This is what the desktop version will look like. And then you can, of course, go in and say you're basically going to get data for the next piece there. I use a lot of different connections on Power BI. I will use Excel. I will use some online data sources. I've connected to SharePoint. Also, when I've done some of these connections. So there's a lot of different ways that you can connect to that data. And my slideshow, unfortunately, for some reason, is just not. Oops. Well, there it went. I was like, it's not working today for some reason. So let me kind of go back just a second here, and let me try to put from current slide and see if we can get that guy to go back, because I do want to show this slide. And it is not. Whoops. I may just come back to my thing here. I think I will do that. I think I may just actually bring this guy down, and then I'll make my slides over here really small, because it's not really being very nice today. So there's that connections area that I was talking about here too. So on this connections area, this is where you can use, SQL Gateway, you can use Excel, again, those online services. I have used Power BI with Salesforce, CRM, basically different websites will offer up data to consume that data with inside of Power BI, do modeling on it. The things that I use it with the most are some of the web services and APIs from some of the online products like Business Central. That's the one that I've used the most with those APIs and web services. And it's definitely very simple to work with those. So the next thing I was saying that we're going to work on too, or we will look at, will be that transforming the data. So if you've been using Power BI, like I said, or Power Query for a couple of years, you're probably gotten to the transform data area where you can make a lot of changes to any of that data in the system. You can change date formats, you can create columns, conditional columns, unpivot. There's just a ton of stuff that you can do when you're transforming that data within inside of Power BI. So that's kind of the basically the second step for that. When I look at transforming that data, you'll see here that I will have a list of tables, and these are my Business Central tables, but you would see the same tables inside of GP. And you can also use views if you want to use views inside of GP. You're just connecting to the SQL Server. If you're wanting to publish that data up, like I was talking about with the desktop version, you would have to have what's called a gateway. So with GP, it's a little more difficult because you do have to have that data gateway installed. It's not a hard thing to install, but that will allow you to have access to your on-premise SQL data. So you may have another SQL server, another product that is running SQL, so you just basically would have to have a gateway for that too. But once you're transforming that data, again, you can do queries inside of the Power BI editor, you can do parameters, and of course you can do coding. So there's some R scripting that you can do. A lot of people will do DAX. So that allows you to do some pretty complex calculations when you're trying to do maybe financial reports and things like that. But that DAX language can be fun but complex, definitely, to work with. And I'll kind of show some of that. And then of course you have your modeling. There's lots of modeling courses out there for Power BI actually, because when you get into some of that modeling, you're combining tables or you're doing joins on tables. So if you've never been a database person, it can be kind of complex, but you're essentially joining, you have a key field in both tables. And so maybe it is a chart of accounts and a general ledger table. So I need to have that key field in between those tables if I'm going to grab data from each table. So that's where you would do some of that modeling. And so I do have a slide here kind of about that modeling. So when you're linking those together, here's a perfect example of multiple tables. And some of the people out there will do what are called fact tables and then transaction tables and also like a date table. I use a date table every time just because it allows me to do my sorting better on my calendars. So I can also provide that date, that's code for a date table, but it basically allows you to build out a date table for as many years as you want, and it just takes a couple of minutes to actually create that date table. But it's pretty cool because then if I have a date that is a certain format, but if I want to have it formatted a different way, or I want to sort on that particular date format, I can have basically like a line sequence on the month names, so that when I'm doing a splicer, that's one of the biggest things it's used for. So if I'm doing a date splicer, that it will go in order. So of course, instead of doing alphabetical order and starting with April, it will start with January, February, and so on. So that's what those date tables are used for a lot. And that's, like I said, that's what I use. I create one pretty much every time. So once you've got on the modeling here, this is where we're still in that modeling section, but there's many to one, one to many, and so on, different relationships when you're trying to join those tables. And essentially, pretty much anybody will tell you that you want a one-to-one relationship, because sometimes when you do a one-to-many, you may get duplicate data, you may not get the correct data. So you want to try to keep them to the one-to-one relationship between those tables. Microsoft, I think it was maybe a year or two ago that they started allowing the one-to-many relationships, and there's a lot of people out there doing videos on the Power BI that'll kind of just say, yeah, we don't really use a lot of those. So again, just be careful with your data linking on the modeling, because you can obviously get some bad data that way. So after you're finished with the modeling, of course, you're going to get into the design of that desktop. So essentially what you're doing now is you're just going in, taking those tables, or that data from the tables, and you can create tables. That's what this one main section right here would be, is you can create that as a table in there so that I'm kind of seeing the data like I would see it in Excel. Of course, I can do graphs, of course, off of that, which are called visuals. There's filtering, and there's also multiple ways that you can filter or do parameters in your data. And then, of course, again, that visualization and drill through functionality. And I am going to go through and kind of show you a couple of things on some drill throughs, because those can be pretty cool. So when you're doing the design and you're doing filters on specific visuals, pages or all pages, so sometimes when you create that visual, it'll ask you, or if you copy that visual, it'll ask you want to sync those visuals, or do you want to have this visual on all pages, or the filter on all pages, or just on a particular visual. So that's just some options that you can make. But one of the really cool things is if you have multiple visuals that are on your page, when you filter to filter on that particular page, it will change all the visuals. And I'll kind of show you that too once we get into my my demo environment there. So the other next step, again, like I said, we'll have some tables in there. Color schemes, this is probably, I'm the worst person for color schemes, because I feel like I must be colorblind even though I'm not. But there's a lot of themes out there. That can be also kind of confusing, but you can do themes. There's theme builders. So you can go to some of the websites out there and put in some colors that you like or you're trying to do for your particular visual. And then it will kind of build out a color scheme for you. Or within inside of Power BI, you can use some of those themes too. So I feel like that takes some of the hardest thing to do, is just to kind of make them look pretty. And when I'm doing reports or dashboards for customers, that's what I always ask them. I may, say, hey, what do you want your dashboards to look like? And inevitably, I always get something back that they say, I don't care what it looks like. And then as soon as you give it to them, they're like, oh, well, I was thinking something else. So a lot of times I will take their logo. That's my tip. I'll usually take their logo and then try to do a color scheme off of their logo, just to kind of, if you're giving it to them to use either internally or externally. That's one of the things that I've always found that kind of helps out on basically visualization and kind of the marketing of those dashboards. So the last thing that we'll have on there is the advanced features that I'm going to go over. So again, I'm going to go over some of the drill through. I'm also going to go over some of the other Excel pieces. And so I did put in some other questions, I think, for some of these, getting into here to see if anybody's kind of used any of the advanced visualizations or any of those other questions that we had out there on the polls. So I don't know if you want to give me an idea of where we, who's used what with those polls.
Yeah, definitely. So we did launch the first question, can you drill down in Power BI to another page? 100% had answered no to that. And then we're going to go and we're going to launch that second one now. We'll give everyone just a moment to answer. Have you ever used a Power BI dataset in Excel? We still have some voting taking place.
Awesome.
And it looks like everyone has voted. We are looking at a 100% answer of no.
Wow. Okay, cool. Well, you've got some good stuff then.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right.
Hold this. You're good.
Well, that tells me then kind of what I can go over. And I think we'll definitely show people a lot of different things that they probably haven't seen yet. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and I've brought up just basically a dashboard that I put together just to kind of show you the most amount of features that I feel like I could show you in an hour. And like I said, you can go on for days and days. Like I said, there's a bunch of people out there on YouTube. I like the guys in a cube are some guys out there. They work for Microsoft, and they have some really great content, and they let you know when new things are coming out. So I watch those guys all the time. They're really good. So this is Power BI desktop that I'm in. So if you notice, I have a little icon at the bottom of my screen. This is where I have gone out here to the Power BI Online. And so this is, you can see that I'm almost seeing the exact same thing online that you were seeing on my desktop. But if you do log into Power BI, as you can see up here at the top, I have a premium per user trial, and I think it just resets all the time because I do a lot with it. And you'll see right here, there's a little download right there. So this is where you can come out. So again, if we're using this on the GP side or any other SQL database, and I may work with other things, I just always use it with SQL. That's where you can get that data gateway there. And we definitely recommend, if you're not the person who is technical or doing a lot of this stuff with SQL, we are happy to help you do that for sure, because you might be a little uncomfortable, or maybe somebody on your IT team would be able to help with that. But that's where you can get that data gateway. This is where you can go out and get your Power BI desktop. The paginated report builder, I actually do use that. And as I was saying, the premium per user license allows me to do that. It's more of a static report and not necessarily a dashboard visual. So it's more like your management reporter reports or the financials inside of BC, or I always call them the SSRS reports, the old SSRS reports from GP. I've built some visuals for customers using the paginated report builder. So it's very similar to Report Builder 3.0. It's almost identical, except it allows you to connect to your Power BI data sets. And then of course you have Power BI for mobile, because you can use it on your phone, and you can actually use it on your Apple Watch, but it's a little small, I will say that. And then you'll see there's some Analyze in Excel. So the Analyze in Excel actually will take my data set and will put the data set into Excel. The only thing that I don't love about it is most people think that what you're seeing on your screen is going to show up in Excel, and unfortunately it does not. So what shows up in Excel is just your data set, and allows you to do pivot tables off of that. But again, the nice thing is I can see that all in Excel very quickly. So I'm going to hop back over to my desktop. And like I said, that's where I'm going to do most of my work. So if you're looking at my desktop here, you'll notice that I have three little icons over here to the left here. So this first icon is, of course, where my reports are going to be stored. I will have tabs across the bottom, and those are just all different visuals. And then, of course, I will have my data, and then I'll have my modeling. So when you're in here and you come in and you get data for the first time, it will bring you into the area where you can transform that data, but I can always get back to those transforms because, of course, I may want to change some things. So if I'm in my get data here, this was one of those things that I was saying, you know, that's your first step, is getting that data. As you can see, there's so many things that I can get that data from. If you don't see it there, absolutely hit that more down there at the bottom, because that's actually where the Business Central data sets are going to be sitting. And you're going to be able to see that there is a lot more options down here too. So if I go into the online options there, you'll see I have Salesforce, I have Nav, I have, you know, Dynamics 365, I have Business Central. So there's so many things or so many applications that you can grab data from. And as long as you have some way to link it between your different data types, then you'll be able to do that model on that. But once I do choose that, and I'll just stick with one that I'm used to and I know it's going to come up, if I do that and I connect it, if you're using Business Central, it is going to ask you to log into your Microsoft account, and then you should see your data sets. If you're using GP, it will then ask you your SQL data usually, or a SQL user to be able to get to that data. So you're going to see here in just a second, it will come up and should connect to my data. If it's not connecting to my data, because I do use a lot of different Business Central environments, then what I can do is I can actually come over to my file area and go to options, and I can change some of that data. But this would come up and it would show my tables in there, and then I would be able to choose those it's not, I shouldn't say tables for Business Central, it's more of web services and APIs. So I'm going to cancel that right now, just because I already have all of my data from BC connected over here to the right. So I can see that I have my date table here, I have my dimension tables, I have my chart of accounts, my vendors, all of that in here, just because I'm building kind of a financial package in this particular example. So if I go to that date table, which was the one I was talking about, you'll notice over here to the right that I'll have a little icon that I could show and hide things. And I also have that more options. So if I'm trying to get in and I either want to see the data, I want to edit the query, I want to refresh just that particular data set, I can do that from over there off to the right. So I can also edit those queries. It is going to launch the Power Query Editor, which is exactly like, again, your Excel editor. But now you can see all of my data connections over here to the left. You can see whatever's in that data to the right here. And then I can see all of my applied steps. In this particular one, there's not a lot of applied steps that are going on because it's just a date table. But this does allow me to sort, and as you can see, I can do it by year, quarter, month, all that kind of stuff. That's why this date table is so awesome. And then if I look at that advanced editor, I can see kind of what those are doing. And so if I go down a little further, maybe on a GL entries, you'll notice off to the right, I do have a lot of applied steps over there. That comes from creating columns, filtering, transforming my data, as we've already kind of talked about. So if you're in the editor, you'll notice up here across the top, that allows you to, go into that transform, and you'll see that I have a whole lot more options in there. Even some of my scripting languages, which R is one of the scripting languages that's used in here. So I have a whole lot of options, and my best recommendation for this one is just take a data set, take a very small data set that you're trying to work with, and go into each of those tabs and essentially just try them. Because what's really cool is once you try them, like if I was going to say, okay, I want to convert a list or something like that, you'll notice over to the right that it actually created that step for me. And all I have to do is, once that's finished, is if I don't like it, I can hover over to the right and see that little X over there, and I can actually just hit that little X, and then it will essentially, that will undo whatever I've done in that particular situation. So very easy to go through and undo things that you have done. Of course, I obviously picked one that's lasting a little longer than it should. I don't know if it's going to let me do that until it finishes. But again, I can go add columns into my views. You can see it's still thinking because there's a little dots going across the top up there. So it's actually still thinking at this point. But if I'm on the add column, this allows me to add columns into my data, which I do definitely all the time. If I go into this view bar, I'm just kind of you can see here, I can look at the dependencies and I can get back into that advanced editor. I can do some diagnostics. And then in one of my windows, I do actually have a DAX writer in here, which can kind of help you with that if you need it. Once I'm done with whatever I was doing in my transpose, then I can just say close and apply, or I could just say close and it's not going to apply, didn't change anything. As you can see, it's going to say that I'm pending changes. I'm going to go ahead and just discard that change because I didn't really want to make that change anyway. You'll notice also over here to the right that, and I'm going to talk about this feature in just a little bit too, but in my data modeling area, you'll see over to the right, there is a is hidden in or is a featured table. So if my table was hidden in here, sometimes I will have a hidden table over here off to the right because it's maybe a table I'm not using. So you would just see that that particular table, as I've highlighted it, when I click on it, you'll see that it has a box around it. So I can say that this is hidden, or I can make that what is called a featured table. And I just recently learned about a featured table from my girlfriend, Belinda Ellen, who is also a very awesome Power BI person. But I can click on that particular area and I can say that that is a featured table. And then I can choose the options in here. And again, it needs to be a primary. So I would have to say, you know, there's a unique ID. I'm just going to go ahead and put ID in both of those. If it doesn't work, you know, it's because it's not finding that as a unique ID. That should be good though. Awesome. So if it doesn't find unique, it will not allow you to do it and it'll say that it needs that. Otherwise, you can see that it turned that on. You will not be able to use that featured table until you publish this. So again, you'd have to have that as a pro license. So I would publish this back up into my workspace on Power BI, and then I would be able to see that in Excel. And like I said, we'll go in there and I'll show you that too. So again, here's my data modeling. If I wanted to publish this, I can publish that right here at the top. And I will publish this in just a minute. So here I'm looking at my data. Again, I can see things about the data. I can filter the data in this view if I wanted. I don't normally filter anything in this window. I try to do it in the transpose, and I don't know if one's better than another or not. It's just something that I do. Getting into a little more of those advanced features that we're talking about too, you'll see up here at the top that I do have some, you know, measures. That's kind of that DAX that I was talking about, or building coding with those particular measures. And so I'm not sure if I actually have any measures in this. I probably do. I'm just not sure which ones they're on. But if I do see those, or if I wanted to create a new measure, I'm going to go back down to my GL data here. If I wanted to create a new measure on that, you'll see that it says write DAX expressions. And so then I can open that up and you'll see that there's going to be a little bar right up here at the top. And this is where I can write any kind of code that I'm wanting. Maybe I'm doing a union, maybe I'm doing a sum. You know, once I do that, you'll see that there's certain things that I can do, or well, actually, let me do a total there. And then, so whatever I'm writing, you'll see that that total would be the name of the measure that I'm doing. And then, so I have, as you saw, when I started typing, things started filtering out. So if I was summing something, so I could sum a particular field. So, you know, maybe I'm in my date table, so that's probably not the best, or actually I do, you know, maybe my account balance with a net change. I'm just picking two columns there. So I can do that. And then I would just add that additional code in there. Again, these are kind of definitely some advanced things that you get into, but they can be extremely powerful. You know, like I said, unions, just depending on what you're doing. And there is a lot of classes out there about writing DAX measures. And so there's a lot of courses that are really good to learn that. And once you learn a couple of them, you can combine measures together. And we have some that are really, really long in some of the Power BI dashboards that we built. So you can combine those measures together too. So if I'm adding something, filtering something, you can do all of that in a measure. Okay, and of course, if I'm like, nope, I don't want that, I can just hit that little X right there and it's just saying, okay, never mind, you're not doing that. You can also, in the another area in there is managing roles. This is one of the biggest features that customers ask me for all the time, is I can actually create like security roles on my data. So those security roles on my data allow me to pick maybe a user ID, maybe a resource name, something like that. And I can actually create and say that this particular visual is, or a certain dimension in a visual, that this particular resource only has access to that dimension. And so when they log in, it will know who it is, and then they will be able to only see the data that they're supposed to see. So those managing roles are pretty awesome up there. All right, so I'm going to go back to my main screen up here, and I'm going to just go through a couple of things that are on here. And so you'll see that I have my choose companies over here to the left. Those are called splicers. And there's also splicers up here at the top. So these splicers over here One of them I have that allows me to go across companies. So that's this 2-1 here. Because I have multiple data sets in there. I can also, again, choose it on a year using my date table, month, same thing, filtering on GL accounts, and so on. So these are just some splicers that I had on this particular visual. Here across the top, what I have done is I've created another splicer, and this one's kind of an advanced splicer. So if you look over here to the right, you're going to see here in my visualizations area that there's a whole bunch of little options up here at the top. Those visualizations are essentially the visualizations that are out of the box. You'll see right below that I have some additional visualizations that are kind of under the line. And these are visualizations where I've actually gone out to say, get more visuals. So if you click on that get more visuals, and I could say import a visual from a file, I could say also just get more visuals, and it can go out to, I kind of call it the app source here, the app source for visuals. But there's Power BI visuals, and they go on, I feel like they go on for days, but there's some really, really cool visuals out here that people have built. Some of them you have to pay for, some of them are free, but in some cases, they will help you to actually be able to build your Power BI visuals easier. So definitely go check that out, because those are super fun. And one of my favorite visuals that I think we've all used forever is the fish visual. So I have my data here for my customers. And as you can see, my visuals over here to the right, I have all these swimming fish. And if I wanted to sort this or choose that particular line, you'll see that my little fish, kind of hard to see, but my little fish down here has a different color. He's a little bit lighter, so that I can tell who that guy is. And then I can actually click on the different fish in the visual, and you can see my data is changing. So if I look at this gray one and I'm like, okay, hey, he's pretty big, who is that? So kind of really cool visuals that you'll be able to, just click on things, and it makes them fun too. The other thing that we were talking about that was one of the questions was the drill through. So if I had all of my customers here, or if I wanted to see what is this 76,000, you'll see that there's a drill through. And over here in the right-hand corner, underneath my visualization, there is a little drill through box down there in the right-hand corner. So this allows me, and you'll see it says customer number. And so what I've done is I've said, take my customer number from this particular page and drill it through to another page. And so if I go to drill through and I say custom ledger details, and I almost always build a detail page, when I do that, what will happen is it's bringing me to my detail page. And now what I'm seeing on that detail page is all of the invoices for that particular customer. So that is one of my biggest things that I love, is that I don't have to have all the detail on my main summary page, but if I want to get to that detail, I can. And then for those users that I don't want inside of GP, because my licenses are kind of expensive, or if you're in Business Central and you just don't want to pay for, again, for a license and they don't have a team license, they can use Power BI and they can still get to that data. So that's the drill through functionality. You just have to make sure that you have the drill through activated on both of those pages. I'm going to go back to my vendor summary here because I've done some other stuff here. All of these visuals are built upon this data, this splicer up here at the top. And so if I click on a particular splicer, actually I'm going to deselect all of them, you'll notice that some of my slicers are changing. There we go. So as I'm clicking on them, they will begin to change. And that's because where we were talking about the visualizations being synced on all the pages, now I can see the different vendors that I have. And now it's just taking it across all of my visualizations. And this is as easy as, taking one of those particular areas, and then I can change those visualizations. So maybe and document type's probably not the best one to do that on, but if I wanted to say, I want a pie chart there instead of having a bar graph. So now I can do that. I can see, hey, these are credit memos and these are payments for this particular situation. So it's so super easy to be able to change those visualizations. And then if you mess it up, you can just do Control Z on your keyboard or hit undo because you maybe had the wrong visualization selected. The other thing that you can do with all of those, don't forget, and this has changed a little bit with the latest version of Power BI Desktop. They've made it a little, things have moved around a little bit for me, so it's taken me longer to find them. But you'll notice over here when you're in those visualizations that you'll kind of have your general area, which is essentially everything that's in that bar graph here. So what field is making up this visual? And then if I get into the paintbrush, that's just essentially how creative you are, right? So if I'm in this particular area, if I want the slices to be certain colors, if I want, you know, to have a background, if I want to have spacing be different, there are so many things that you can change on these visualizations. You can spend days. And you'll notice that once I went into that visualization, and you can search for them too. So if you think you know the name of it, you can always search for it. So if you'll see here, there's a general tab here. So now this allows me to have dynamic titles, get rid of titles, change the color of the titles, make things rounded, as you can see down here. So there's a ton of things you can do with those visuals once you get them on the page. And then of course, once you've got all that done, if you're using that pro license, you can just kind of come up here and say that I want to save and publish this particular visual out to my workspace. So if I have a workspace created in Power BI, and we could probably do a whole nother session on workspaces out there, I can choose that workspace, I can select that, and it already sees this report out there, so I could say, yeah, I'm going to replace it, or no, I'm not. If I replace it, it's obviously going to replace that visual out there. And what I'm seeing on that is just essentially this visual here. And I'm going to go back for just a second on my visual and go into that particular workspace. So this is the report, and this is the data set that's associated with that. So if I look at that report out here, you'll see that it's pretty common, and I'll have my tabs over here on the left as opposed to going across. And I can, of course, switch between those tabs here. If I publish this as what's called an app, you'll see over here to the left with inside of the workspace. And this is usually what I give customers access to, is the app. So if I come into the app here and I go in and look at that app, this is what my customer experience is at this point. So now they're kind of seeing it where they're not seeing any editor windows. All they're seeing is the different tabs that they can move through to see that data. Okay. So that is all in a Power BI world. And I know we're getting a little short on time, but I still want to go over to my Excel world just for a minute to show you some of those other features that are really cool in Excel. So as I was saying, in Excel, you also have a data tab, just like you have it in Power BI. You will still have that also Get Data tab. And I do have a video out there about this too, about actually getting data if you're using Business Central, how to get data from there. So I can combine queries, I can say other sources here, I can do OData feeds, blank queries, and of course I can get data from the web too. If you're using BC, this is where you can put the URL from some of those. There are some changes going on with that in version 20 of BC, but that's how you can put that OData feed in here and get to that data. The other way you can get to some of that Business Central data, as I was saying, is those featured tables that we published up a few minutes ago. So if you're in your data area, you can see here, I just created a chart of accounts and I was grabbing things on my chart of accounts. So this little area right here allows me to get data from my data sources inside of what I just published from that other Power BI Power BI dashboard. So you can see here, I have kind of started this because it takes a little bit. So I have grabbed basically the chart of accounts. So this was my checking account, my savings account. you'll notice, and then I just grabbed this little connection here, and that little connection allows me to see fields that are actually in that table inside of BC or wherever else. And I think this one's really only BC and not for GP. Any of these fields by just clicking that. So if I had my entire chart of accounts maybe coming from another system, and I pasted it into Excel, I could then quickly create a table from that number. And then I could also add other fields from my table, basically my table inside of there. So maybe I want the category, maybe I want to throw in the subcategory. So super easy to be able to get to those data types from within inside to see that data. So that's one of the coolest things that I've seen recently. And you'll see that there's a couple out of the box that I think it's just stocks and geography that are in there. And so another one, I just created another one down here for states. So I just added a couple of states in here. And same type of thing on this, you'll notice that these are just kind of out of the box. So I could see what the population is of particular states. And so basically Excel is able to get that data. So my coolest thing is you can get your BC data, your BC data from, GL tables, vendor ledger entry tables, or chart of account master tables, and see that in Excel. Okay. There's, like I said, there's multiple ways to get a lot of that data into Excel. And as you see right here, this was new, just pretty recent because I happened to see it one day. But you'll see that there's from a Power BI data set, okay? And it is looking at my environment in Power BI. So if you remember, I just published that particular report up there, and you might have saw the little data set. I said, one's the report, one's the data set. So I can also from Excel say, hey, I'm gonna go get a data set from Power BI. So when I click on that, it's going to actually go look at my connection. It's going to say, these are all of the data sets that we are finding on your workspace in Power BI. So this is the one I just published, so an hour ago. So I could click on that. And now what it's doing is it's actually creating a pivot table. So it's almost like that Analyze in Excel feature I was talking about, but it is going to create my pivot data over there to the right. And so then now I would be able to log in to that and again, consume more of that data. I'll go ahead and log in there for just a second. And okay. So it'll take just a second there. Whoops, let me get back to my Excel. It's taking a minute. There we go. So now I can see that data over here to the right. And of course, if you remember, I had a whole lot of tables over there. And so now I can scroll down and I can see that same type, those exact same data sets. Now I'm seeing those inside of Excel. And so again, I can build those pivot tables off of that data. So I think that was probably enough, and probably everybody's slightly overwhelmed at this point. So if we wanted to possibly take questions, we could put them in the chat. Or possibly come off of mute. If we had any questions.
Just waiting here to see if there are any questions that are input.
Awesome.
So far, it doesn't look like there are any. There's probably a lot of information being digested at this point, which is awesome.
There is a lot.
Yeah, I think that this was such a great and refreshing presentation and had so much value. So, we really appreciate you taking the time to share this with our customers, because I know Power BI is definitely a sweet spot for a lot of them. So this was
yes. And now you say this morning when I thought it was only 30 minutes, I was a little afraid.
Yeah. Well, we definitely needed more than 30 minutes of
yes,
carving out an hour, still only scratching the surface. So
absolutely. Yep.
looks like we don't have any questions at this time, which
All
is
right.
fair. I think maybe we might have to have this video rewatched a few times to even develop the right questions because of how much
Yep.
information you shared. So I will be sending out this record. Oh, look, we do have a question. Let's see. So the question is, can you use Power BI to transform XML data into a database?
Oh, I would probably say yes, you probably could using some DAX measures would be my guess. Because well, actually the XML data should just be going down, so you might be able to transpose some of that data too. So that's where I would start would be bringing, if I have that data in here and I'm in my transform data. Yeah, like I said, I haven't done XML. I don't do a lot with XML at all, but I'm sure probably can. But I know you can transpose that data, so you can take rows to columns and columns to rows. So that's where I would start with that. And I have had some pretty ugly Excel files that I've transposed very cleanly in here. And you don't have to transpose all of the fields. You can highlight just certain fields and transpose that data too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It looks like that was the only question, which, you know, is fine. Tanya actually does a
That's
lot,
a hard one.
has been doing work with us for a very long time. So she's always going to be a resource that we leverage if you have maybe some projects that will require for you to reach outside of your team. Tanya is a great resource, and we'd be happy to put you in touch with her. If you have any questions, I'll be sending that follow-up video along with her slides. I think that we have come to a really great stopping point. So I will go ahead and just thank everyone for spending the afternoon with us. Tanya, again, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. And I wish everyone an incredible afternoon.
Thank you so much. You too.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.